Here are 25 horror games on Steam and Switch 2 that are absolutely worth your time right now. Let's get into it. First up at number 1 is Resident Evil 2 Remake. And if you have not played this yet, you are genuinely missing out on one of the best survival horror games ever made. Capcom took the 1998 original and rebuilt it completely from the ground up in third person, and the result is a tense, deeply atmospheric game where every hallway feels dangerous. Mr. X chasing you through the Raccoon City Police Department is one of gaming's most unforgettable horror experiences, and the game holds up beautifully in 2026. Coming in at number 2, Resident Evil Village is the kind of game that shifts tone constantly and somehow pulls it off every single time. You start in a frozen Gothic village, chased by werewolves. Then you end up in a creepy dollhouse, a misty swamp, and a factory that feels completely wrong. Lady Dimitrescu became an instant icon, but beyond the memes, this is a brilliantly paced horror game with satisfying gunplay and a story that genuinely gets under your skin by the time the credits roll. Number 3 on the list is Alien Isolation. And 12 years after its original release, this game still has absolutely no competition when it comes to pure tension and dread. You play as Amanda Ripley aboard the Sevastopol space station, with a single xenomorph hunting you throughout the entire campaign. The creature learns your habits and adapts, which means no two playthroughs feel exactly the same. The environmental storytelling, the retro-futuristic aesthetic, and the relentless atmosphere make this essential playing for any serious horror fan. Sitting at number 4, Phasmophobia has become one of the most played co-op horror games on the planet, and the reasons are obvious once you actually boot it up. You and up to 3 friends investigate haunted locations, gather evidence, and try to identify what type of ghost you're dealing with before it kills you. The ghost AI is smart enough to genuinely surprise you even after dozens of hours, and the randomized haunting types mean every contract feels fresh. Solo play is terrifying in a completely different way. Number 5 is Alan Wake 2, and this is one of the most ambitious horror games to come out in years. Remedy Entertainment took everything that made the original cult classic so fascinating and pushed it into something far stranger and more cinematic. The dual narrative structure following both Alan and Saga Anderson across parallel storylines is bold and totally works. The live action sequences, the music room moments, and the sheer confidence of the whole thing make this a must-play for anyone who loves psychological and narrative horror done at a high level. Coming in 6th is Little Nightmares 2, which is a side-scrolling horror platformer that manages to be deeply unsettling without relying on jump scares or gore. You play as Mono, navigating a decayed world full of grotesque enemies, including a television-headed teacher, a cruel doctor, and worse. The art design is extraordinary, and the way the game builds dread through its environments and sound design, rather than cheap tactics, makes it stand out. It works equally well on Switch and Steam, and is genuinely one of the best-looking horror games in its style. Number 7 is Dead by Daylight, and even in 2026, this asymmetric multiplayer horror game remains one of the most played titles in its genre. One player takes the role of the killer, while 4 survivors try to repair generators and escape the map. The roster of licensed killers, including Ghostface, Pyramid Head, and Michael Myers, is enormous now, and the team behind the game continues adding content at a steady pace. Whether you are trying to escape or hunting survivors, the tension in every single match is real and it never gets old. At number 8, we have the Outlast Trials, which is the smartest evolution the Outlast series has made yet. It takes the relentless pursuit and brutal atmosphere the franchise is known for and adds up to 4-player co-op, making it both more chaotic and more replayable than its predecessors. The Cold War psychological experiment setting is deeply uncomfortable in the best possible way, and the variety of trial types keeps runs from feeling repetitive. If you have friends willing to suffer alongside you, this is an outstanding co-op horror experience right now. Number 9 is Amnesia The Bunker, and this entry reinvented the long-running series in ways that surprised a lot of people. Rather than a linear experience, it drops you into a semi-open World War I bunker with a monster stalking you, limited resources, and a generator you need to keep running just to maintain light. every decision feels weighted because noise attracts the creature, and everything in the bunker is noisy. It is tense in a way that feels genuinely oppressive and completely different from the earlier Amnesia games that fans loved. Coming in at number 10, SOMA is one of the most genuinely disturbing horror games ever made, but not in the way most people expect. Developed by Frictional Games, the studio behind Amnesia, it is a first-person science fiction horror game set deep underwater, with a story about consciousness, identity, and what it means to be human. The philosophical dread that builds throughout the campaign hits harder than almost any jump scare could. If you want something that stays with you long after you stop playing, SOMA is essential. Number 11 is Signalis, and this is a modern indie game with an overwhelming love for classic survival horror that absolutely earns its place among the best in the genre. It draws heavily from the early Resident Evil and Silent Hill games, presenting a dense, tragic science fiction story through a pixel art style that somehow makes everything feel more haunting rather than less. The inventory management, the puzzle design, and the layered narrative all come together into something that feels both nostalgic and completely fresh. At number 12, we have Layers of Fear from 2023, which is a rebuilt and expanded version of the series that pulls together both games and the DLC under one beautifully redesigned umbrella. The first-person psychological horror takes you through a painter's increasingly disturbed mind, and the walking horror format is executed here with real craft. The environments shift and warp around you in ways that disorient without feeling gimmicky, and the storytelling through environmental detail is genuinely impressive. It is best experienced in a quiet room with headphones. Number 13 on the list is The Evil Within 2, a game that became severely underrated over the years and deserves far more attention than it gets. It follows Detective Sebastian Castellanos entering a simulated reality to save his daughter, and the world it puts you in is brilliant and bizarre. It blends open-world exploration with tight linear horror sequences, and the tonal swings between psychological dread and action work better than they probably should. This is a confident, weird, and underappreciated game that holds up extremely well. Coming in at 14 is Darkwood, which remains one of the most effective top-down survival horror games ever released. You explore a dark, procedurally shaped forest during the day, gathering supplies, and then you barricade yourself inside a shelter at night while things try to get in. The perspective removes a lot of the safety that most horror games provide, because you can never see everything around you. The atmosphere is oppressive, the world building is cryptic and fascinating, and the sense of dread never lets up from start to finish. Number 15 is Fatal Frame Maiden of Black Water, and this is one of the most uniquely Japanese horror experiences you can have on either platform right now. You fight ghosts by photographing them with the camera obscura, and the closer you are to a spirit when you take the shot, the more damage you deal. The result is a game that forces you to lean into fear rather than run from it. The setting is a haunted mountain shrouded in mist and water, and the ghost designs are extraordinary. It is atmospheric horror at its most elegantly strange. At number 16, Resident Evil 7 Biohazard marked such a dramatic reinvention of the Resident Evil series that it shocked everyone and reminded the world exactly why this franchise matters. Moving to a first-person perspective and stripping back the action in favor of pure survival horror, it drops you into the decaying Baker estate with almost nothing to defend yourself. The first third of the game in particular is some of the most terrifying sustained horror in gaming history. It is available on Steam and coming to Switch too, making it more accessible than ever. Number 17 is Doki Doki Literature Club Plus, and this is the game you recommend to someone when you want to genuinely surprise them. It presents itself as a light and friendly visual novel about a high school literature club, and then it slowly and methodically dismantles that premise in ways that are psychologically disturbing and completely unexpected. The Plus version adds side stories and additional content that flesh out the characters further. Even knowing the twist going in, the execution is precise enough that it still lands with real force. Coming in at number 18, the Mortuary Assistant is a hidden gem that deserves way more attention than it typically gets in horror discussions. You play as a mortuary worker preparing bodies for cremation overnight, and the game slowly introduces supernatural elements in a way that builds genuine dread. The procedural nature of each shift means no two nights are identical, and figuring out which body is possessed and why becomes a fascinating and unsettling puzzle. The atmosphere is quiet, claustrophobic, and remarkably effective at getting under your skin. At number 19, we have Slay the Princess, which is an absolutely exceptional horror visual novel that subverts every expectation you bring to it. Your goal seems simple at first: reach a cabin in the woods and prevent the princess inside from escaping. But every choice you make and every playthrough you complete reveals another layer of the story that recontextualizes everything that came before it. The hand-drawn art style, the outstanding voice acting, and the philosophical depth make this something completely unlike anything else in the horror genre right now. Number 20 is Detention, a side-scrolling horror game set in 1960s Taiwan under martial law that weaves real historical horror into its supernatural storytelling in an incredibly effective way. The game draws on Taiwanese and Chinese folklore and mythology, and the way it filters personal trauma through ghostly imagery is genuinely affecting. It is shorter than most games on this list, but every moment of it is deliberate and memorable. If you want horror that feels culturally distinct and emotionally resonant, Detention is unmissable. Coming in at 21, Poppy Playtime has evolved from a simple indie novelty into a surprisingly well-developed horror episodic series with real lore and unsettling creature design. The Toy Factory setting is brilliantly chosen because it takes something associated with childhood comfort and makes it feel fundamentally wrong. The grab pack mechanic gives the gameplay a distinctive physical feel, and the game has continued improving with each new chapter. Chapter 5 landed in early 2026, and the series is absolutely at its best right now. Number 22 is Blair Witch, which is a first-person psychological horror game set in the Black Hills Forest that captures the claustrophobic dread of the 1999 film brilliantly. You play as a former police officer searching for a missing child, accompanied by your dog Bullet, and the relationship between the two of you becomes one of the game's most genuinely affecting elements. The forest environment is masterfully designed, and the way the game plays with video footage and perception to build its horror is creative and effective throughout. At number 23, we have Visage, which is one of the most ambitious psychological horror games to come out of the indie space, and a game that takes clear inspiration from the canceled PT demo and pushes that concept further. You explore a house where multiple families suffered terrible fates, and each chapter immerses you in a different family's tragedy. The pacing is slow and deliberate, the scares are earned rather than cheap, and the overall level of craft on display is remarkable for an independent production. This one truly rewards patient players. Number 24 is Dread Templar, which earns its spot on this list as one of the best retro horror-infused shooters currently available on Steam. It combines old-school first-person shooter mechanics with heavy metal aesthetics and demonic horror imagery, channeling the energy of classic 90s shooters while adding its own identity. The level design is intricate and satisfying, the combat is fast and punchy, and the whole package has a gleeful, dark energy that makes it an excellent change of pace if you have been working through heavier atmospheric horror titles. Finally, at number 25, the Coma 2 Vicious Sisters closes out this list with a beautifully drawn Korean survival horror game that blends intense chase sequences with exploration and inventory management. You play as Mina Park, navigating a sinister shadow version of her school and the surrounding city, while hunted by a monstrous version of her teacher. The hand-drawn art is stunning, the atmosphere is thick and oppressive, and the game rewards careful exploration and resource management. It is an outstanding and underseen horror experience, available right now on Steam.